a millionaire's wife disguises as a waiter to attend his luxurious party. What she discovered shocked her as she approached him. So the Manhattan penthouse gleamed with the kind of understated elegance that only the very wealthy could afford. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of Central Park, the snow-covered treetops sparkling of the soft glow of the city's Christmas lights. Inside, the air was filled with the scent of fresh pine from the enormous Christmas tree standing proud in the corner, its ornaments meticulously chosen to complement the penthouse's muted gold and ivory palette. Rebecca Morgan stood in the open-concept living area, surveying the bustling activity around her. How staff moved with quiet efficiency, hanging garlands and adjusting candles on the grand dining table. Rebecca, dressed in a simple yet elegant sweater and jeans, her auburn hair pulled into a loose bun, exuded an air of calm authority. But behind her poised exterior, there was a tightness in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite shake. Her two children, 11-year-old Sophie and 8-year-old Ethan, sat cross-legged on the plush cream rug near the tree. Sophie was animatedly discussing the dinner menu with Ethan, who was more focused on peeking at the wrapped presents beneath the tree. "Do you think Aunt Sarah's bringing her famous pumpkin pie again this year?" Sophie asked, her eyes lighting up. Ethan shrugged. "I hope so. But what if Dad got one of those fancy cakes from that bakery instead?" Rebecca smiled at their chatter, though her heart ached at the mention of their father. She glanced at the clock. Livingstone was late again. The sound of the penthouse elevator chiming signaled his arrival. Rebecca instinctively straightened, smoothing her sweater as the doors slid open to reveal her husband, Livingstone Morgan. Livingstone was a vision of polished charm. At 6'2", with perfectly combed salt and pepper hair and a tailored navy suit, he looked every bit the successful architect he had built his reputation on. The new gold watch gleamed on his wrist, catching the light as he strode in with an air of effortless confidence. "Daddy!" Sophie and Ethan cried in unison, rushing to greet him. Livingstone bent down just enough to ruffle Ethan's hair and plant a quick kiss on Sophie's cheek. "Hey, kiddos," he said, his voice warm but rushed. "Don't destroy the tree before Christmas morning, all right?" Rebecca stepped forward, a smile hovering on her lips. "You're just in time. We're finalizing the menu. Sophie's been insisting we—" Rebecca, Livingstone interrupted, holding up a hand as if halting a meeting. "Let's keep it simple this year, all right? I've had a day, and I've got some news." The smile froze on Rebecca's face. "News?" He flashed his signature grin, the one that charmed clients and disarmed critics. "I have to fly out tomorrow. Business trip. Some big clients are hosting a holiday gathering in Aspen, and I need to be there." Rebecca's heart sank. "But the family dinner, everyone's expecting you." "I'll make it up to them," Livingstone said dismissively, shrugging out of his coat and tossing it onto the couch. "When this deal could set us up for the next 2 years. Rebecca swallowed the lump rising in her throat. They carefully planned dinner, the hours spent coordinating schedules with their extended family, all of it dismissed with a casual wave. Sophie's voice broke the tense silence. "But Dad, you promised you'd help me put the star on the tree tomorrow night." Livingstone crouched down to her level, his tone softening. "Sweetheart, sometimes Daddy has to work to make sure we can do things like have this amazing penthouse and all those presents under the tree. You understand, don't you?" Sophie nodded reluctantly, but Rebecca saw the disappointment in her eyes. As Livingstone straightened, Rebecca forced a smile. "I'll make sure everything goes smoothly here. Could you just focus on your trip?" "Exactly," he said, brushing past her toward the bar. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, inspecting his reflection in the glass cabinet. "Oh, by the way, did you see this?" He held up his wrist, showcasing the new watch. Limited edition. Cost a fortune, but worth every penny. One of the partners at the firm practically begged me to tell him where I got it. Rebecca nodded mechanically, her gaze fixed on the glass in his hand. The man she had married, a driven but kind-hearted dreamer, had become a stranger cloaked in wealth and self-importance. Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed, Rebecca lingered in the living room. She watched the lights on the Christmas tree flicker, her mind racing. Livingstone's detachment had been growing for months, but tonight it felt different, more final. Rebecca stood at the edge of Livingstone's walk-in closet, The familiar scent of his cologne, woody and expensive, was lingering in the air. His suits hung in perfect alignment, arranged by color and season, a testament to his fastidious nature. His shoes beneath him gleamed under the recessed lighting, polished to a mirror shine. Each detail reflected the man he had become, polished, powerful, and increasingly distant. In her hands was a freshly laundered shirt. She'd come in to put it away, but her eyes lingered on the space. How often had Livingstone disappeared into this closet, claiming he needed to grab something before rushing out, phone clutched tightly in his hand. The thought was fleeting but unsettling, like a loose thread she dared not pull. As Rebecca moved to place the shirt on its designated hanger, something caught her eye, a cream-colored paper peeking out from beneath one of his leather-bound portfolios. Curiosity prickled at her. Livingstone was meticulous to the point of obsession. He never left anything out of place. She reached for the paper, her fingers brushing against its textured surface. When she unfolded, her heart sank. The invitation was exquisite, thick, embossed stationery with delicate gold filigree around the edges. The handwriting was elegant, almost romantic, and it bore an unmistakable weight of exclusivity. You are cordially invited to an intimate holiday dinner at the estate of Mr. and Mrs. Charles Whitmore. Addressed to Mr. Livingstone Morgan and Miss Amanda Lay. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. Her vision blurred as the name Amanda Lay burned into her mind. She read it again, hoping she had somehow misread it, but the words didn't change. The invitation wasn't meant for her. The air seemed to thicken around her. For a moment, all she could hear was the faint ticking of Livingstone's Rolex, resting on a nearby valet tray. Time slowed, the sound of her own breathing loud and erratic in the silent room. Her fingers trembled as she traced the handwriting, the intimate curl of the M in Amanda. Who was she? Rebecca's thoughts raced as pieces of a puzzle she didn't even know she was solving began to fall into place. Rebecca sank into the plush armchair in the corner of the closet, the invitation clutched in her hands. As the shock began to settle, memories surged forward like waves breaking against a rocky shore. There was that night 3 months ago when Livingstone had come home late, smelling faintly a perfume that wasn't hers. She'd asked about his day, and he'd brushed her off with a distracted smile, claiming he'd been stuck in client meetings. Then there were the texts, short, cryptic messages he seemed determined to shield from her view. She remembered the way he'd turned his phone away one evening, muttering about sensitive business details. At the time, she hadn't pushed. She trusted him. But the signs had been there, hadn't they? The sudden, inexplicable grooming habits. Livingstone had always cared about his appearance, but recently he'd taken it to a new level. Weekly barber appointments, a new personal trainer, even an extravagant cologne that she hadn't picked out. And then there were the purchases. Flashbacks came in rapid succession. The sleek new car he'd driven home with no warning, proclaiming it a reward for closing a major deal. The designer gifts for clients and associates, each one more extravagant than the last. The nights he spent hosting networking events in the penthouse, where she was relegated to the role of a silent hostess, while he basked in the admiration of his peers. Rebecca's stomach churned as she realized how blind she had been, or perhaps how desperately she had wanted to believe in the life they had built together. A faint knock at the door jolted her back to the present. Sophie's voice, soft and hesitant, filtered through the heavy wood. "Mom? Are you okay?" Rebecca quickly folded the invitation and tucked it into her pocket. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I'll be out in a minute." She rose to her feet, smoothing her sweater and forcing her features into a mask of calm. But inside she felt like a thread pulled too tight, ready to snap. When she emerged from the closet, Sophie was waiting, her wide eyes full of concern. "You look sad," Sophie said, tilting her head. Rebecca crouched to her daughter's level, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I'm just tired, honey. Lots to do before Christmas." Sophie nodded but didn't seem convinced. "Dad said you worry too much. He said you should just relax more." Rebecca's chest tightened. "Did he now?" He said work's been really hard for him lately, but he's doing it all for us." Rebecca kissed Sophie's forehead, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Why don't you go help Ethan finish his puzzle? I'll be right there." And that night, Rebecca lay awake in their king-sized bed, the invitation hidden in the drawer of her nightstand. So Livingstone slept beside her, his even breathing the only sound in the room. She studied his face in the dim light, searching for the man she had fallen in love with years ago. But all she saw was someone she barely recognized, a man consumed by ambition, untouchable in his arrogance. She thought about Amanda Leigh. Was she younger? Prettier? Rebecca's insecurities clawed at her, filling her with doubts. The next morning, Livingstone left early, muttering something about meetings before disappearing down the private elevator. As Rebecca watched him go, her mind made up. She couldn't confront him, not yet. She needed to know the truth. She pulled out the invitation and studied it again, noting the date and location. It was just 3 days away. A plan began to form in her mind, though the thought of it made her stomach churn. Rebecca closed the drawer and stood by the window, staring out at the snow-dusted city below. The holiday lights twinkled against the night sky, but their warmth felt distant, unreachable. For the first time, she questioned whether her marriage had become as hollow as the carefully curated image they presented to the world. And in that moment, she knew this wasn't just about Amanda. It was about her, about reclaiming the parts of herself that had been overshadowed by Livingstone's wealth and ego. And whatever she found in the days ahead, Rebecca vowed, she wouldn't lose herself in the process. If you found an invitation like this, would you confront your partner immediately or wait to gather more evidence? The air was crisp as Rebecca stepped out of the ride-share car, her breath visible in the glow of the estate's towering lampposts. The private estate was nothing short of a masterpiece, an architectural marvel draped in the shimmering glow of thousands of lights. The mansion, with its grand stone facade and wrought iron dates, loomed ahead like a scene from a fairy tale, but to Rebecca, it felt more like a fortress guarding dark secrets. Rebecca tugged at the hem of her borrowed black dress and adjusted the discreet name tag pinned to her lapel, catering staff. Her heart pounded as she approached the servants' entrance at the side of the estate. She had never imagined herself in a situation like this, pretending to be someone else to spy on her husband. But the invitation in her purse and the gnawing doubts in her heart left her no choice. The estate's interior was even more opulent than its exterior. Chandeliers glittered overhead, their crystals catching the light like tiny stars. A live quartet played soft, melodic tunes in the corner of the room, their music blending seamlessly with the hum of conversation and clinking champagne flutes. The scent of gardenias wafted through the air, mingling with the aroma of gourmet hors d'oeuvres carried by uniformed waitstaff. Rebecca's eyes darted through the crowd, scanning for Livingstone. The guests, a dazzling display of wealth and privilege, moved through the room with an effortless elegance that Rebecca found both intimidating and nauseating. Diamonds sparkled on wrists and necks. Designer suits and gowns whispered of power and exclusivity. Livingstone stood near a grand fireplace, one hand holding a glass of amber liquid, the other resting casually on the small of a woman's back. Rebecca's breath caught as she took in Amanda Leigh, a vision of lay and sophistication. Amanda's dark hair cascaded in loose waves over her shoulders, her figure wrapped in a sleek, emerald green gown that clung to her like a second skin. A diamond necklace adorned her neck, and her laughter rang out like a bell. She leaned into Livingstone, her manicured fingers brushing his arm. Rebecca's stomach twisted. She forced herself to look away, clutching the tray of champagne glasses she had been given moments earlier. The caterer who had handed her the tray had said nothing, merely nodding when Rebecca claimed she was new. It was the kind of place where people rarely questioned those they deemed invisible. Rebecca moved through the room, careful to avoid Livingstone's line of sight. Her palms grew damp as she watched him from the corner of her eye. He looked completely at ease, his charm on full display as he entertained Amanda and a small circle of admirers. He gestured animatedly, recounting what seemed to be a humorous story, eliciting laughter from the group. Amanda, however, barely took her eyes off him, her admiration palpable. Rebecca edged closer, pretending to refill a guest's glass while straining to hear their conversation. "And that's how we closed the deal," Livingstone said with a grin, lifting his glass in a mock toast. "It's all about persistence and knowing when to charm and when to pressure." "Your brilliance never ceases to amaze me," Amanda said, her voice silky and low. She reached out, lightly tracing a line down Livingstone's arm. "No wonder everyone adores you." Rebecca bit the inside of her cheek to keep her emotions in check. Her grip tightened on the tray as Livingstone leaned in closer to Amanda, his voice dropping to an intimate tone. "Speaking of adoration," he said, his hand dipping into his pocket, "I have something for you." Rebecca froze, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain someone would hear it. She shifted slightly, angling herself to see better without drawing attention. Livingstone pulled out a small velvet box and handed it to Amanda with a flourish. "Consider it an early Christmas gift," he said, his voice dripping with charm. Amanda gasped, opening the box to reveal an exquisite bracelet, a platinum encrusted with diamonds. It shimmered in the light, each stone catching and reflecting the room's glow. "Oh, Livingstone," Amanda breathed, her fingers trembling as she lifted the bracelet. "It's stunning." Rebecca felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. She knew that bracelet. It was a family heirloom, something Livingstone's grandmother had given to his mother, who had passed it down to him. He had told Rebecca it would someday belong to Sophie. "I couldn't resist," Livingstone said, fastening the bracelet around Amanda's wrist. "It belonged to someone very special, and now it's yours." Rebecca's chest constricted. Her vision blurred as tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them away, determined to stay focused. She needed proof. She fumbled for her phone, slipping it out of her pocket and angling it discreetly. The camera clicked softly as she captured the moment, Amanda's delighted smile, Livingstone's self-satisfied smirk, the glittering bracelet on her wrist. She lingered only a moment longer, long enough to hear Amanda say, "You spoil me, you know that. I don't deserve you." Livingstone chuckled. "Oh, you deserve everything and more." Rebecca turned away, bile rising in her throat. She pushed through the crowd, her hands trembling as she set the tray down on a nearby table. She needed to leave now. Every instinct screamed at her to confront him, to march up to him and demand answers in front of everyone. But she couldn't. Not here, not like this. She slipped out through the servants' entrance, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. She inhaled deeply, trying to steady herself, but her thoughts were a storm. The image of Livingstone fastening that bracelet onto Amanda's wrist replayed in her mind like a cruel loop. Back in the car, Rebecca clutched her phone like a lifeline. She stared at the photos she had taken, each one a dagger to her heart. Her world, once gilded with love and trust, had been cracked open, revealing the rot beneath the surface. Would you have had the courage to attend the party and witness the betrayal firsthand? Let me know in the comment section. As the car sped away from the estate, Rebecca gazed out at the twinkling lights of the city, her reflection staring back at her from the window. She felt broken but resolute. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on. She had seen the truth with her own eyes, and now there was no turning back. The city lights glittered in the distance as Rebecca stared out of the penthouse window. Her reflection in the glass looked foreign to her. Her eyes rimmed red, lips pressed into a determined line. In her lap sat a manila folder filled with the weight of truth, the photocopied invitation, photos of Livingstone and Amanda from the dinner, and a close-up of the bracelet. Each piece of evidence felt heavier than the last, pressing down on her chest like a stone. The penthouse, once a place of comfort and warmth, felt cold and uninviting. The Christmas tree twinkled in the corner, its lights casting shadows across the room. The children were asleep in their bedrooms, their innocent laughter earlier that evening still echoing in Rebecca's mind. They didn't know the storm brewing beneath their family's polished exterior, and Rebecca was determined to shield them as much as she could. She spread the evidence out on the coffee table, her hands shaking slightly. The photo of Amanda wearing the bracelet stared back at her, mocking the years of trust she had placed in Livingstone. She picked it up, running her thumb over the image. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a deliberate and calculated insult. The bracelet had been promised to Sophie, their daughter, one day. That promise, like so many others, now lay shattered. Rebecca leaned back on the couch, closing her eyes. Memories flooded her mind of the early days with Livingstone, when his ambition had seemed noble and his charm genuine. She thought of their late-night talks about dreams and family, of the way he'd once made her feel seen, heard, and loved. When had it all changed? Was it gradual, like a creeping tide, or had she simply refused to see the truth until now? A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly, as though erasing any sign of weakness. She couldn't afford to wallow, not now. Rebecca spent the next few hours in meticulous preparation. She printed duplicates of the photos, enlarging the one of Amanda and Livingstone at the dinner. The invitation sat neatly in the center of the evidence, its elegant handwriting now a glaring symbol of deceit. Every detail of her plan had to be perfect. She rehearsed her words in front of the mirror, her voice wavering as she tried to find the balance between strength and restraint. She wanted to expose Livingstone's betrayal without letting her emotions spiral out of control. This wasn't just about her pain. It was about reclaiming her dignity and setting boundaries, not just for herself, but for her children. The next morning, she sat at the dining table, sipping her coffee as Livingstone breezed in, phone in hand. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, a picture of effortless charm. "Morning," he said absently, scrolling through his messages. "Good morning," Rebecca replied, her tone neutral. "Big day ahead," he continued, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "I'm meeting some investors this afternoon. It's going to be a game changer." Rebecca nodded, her face betraying nothing. She had learned to mask her feelings well over the years. "And tonight," Livingstone added with a smile, "I'm looking forward to the Christmas Eve dinner. Everyone's coming, right?" "Yes," Rebecca said, her voice steady. "Everyone." Livingstone didn't notice the edge in her tone. He was already halfway out the door, muttering something about a call he needed to take. Rebecca watched him leave, her resolve hardening like steel. For that evening, the penthouse was alive with the sounds of family and laughter. Relatives admired the decorations, sipping champagne and nibbling on hors d'oeuvres. The children ran around excitedly, showing off their Christmas outfits. The Morgan family's living room was a picture of opulence, aglow with warm, golden light from the chandelier above. A roaring fire crackled in the grand marble fireplace, casting flickering shadows on the walls adorned with tasteful holiday decor. The massive Christmas tree stood as the room's centerpiece, adorned with crystal ornaments that caught the light and glimmered like stars. Surrounding it were carefully wrapped gifts, their ribbons and paper as extravagant as the room itself. Laughter and chatter filled the air as relatives mingled, holding glasses of champagne and complimenting each other's holiday attire. Livingstone stood near the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in hand, wearing a custom-tailored suit that drew admiring glances. His charm was in full force as he regaled a small circle of relatives with a tale of his latest business triumph. Rebecca sat on the plush cream sofa, a calm expression on her face that belied the storm brewing within. She watched Livingstone from across the room, studying the way he effortlessly commanded attention, his every gesture calculated to project confidence and control. But she knew what lay beneath that polished exterior now, and tonight the truth would be laid bare. Sophie and Ethan sat on the rug near the tree, giggling as they tried to guess the contents of the presents. Their excitement was palpable, their innocence a painful reminder of what was at stake. And Rebecca took a deep breath, steadying herself. "All right, everyone." Livingstone's booming voice cut through the room. "It's time for the gift exchange. Let's make this a Christmas to remember." The guests gathered around, perching on sofas and armchairs as Livingstone began handing out presents with dramatic flair. Each gift was met with gasps of delight and murmurs of admiration. A designer handbag for his sister, a set of rare cufflinks for his brother-in-law, and an antique clock for his parents. Rebecca's turn came, and Livingstone approached her with a box wrapped in silver paper. His smile was wide, his eyes gleaming with pride. "For my beautiful wife," he announced, handing her the gift. Rebecca accepted it with a small, polite smile, noting how the room quieted slightly, all eyes on her. She opened the box carefully, revealing an expensive-looking cashmere scarf. It was soft, luxurious, and utterly impersonal. "Thank you, Livingstone," she said, her voice steady. She draped the scarf over her lap, glancing at him. "It's lovely." Livingstone nodded, satisfied, before turning his attention to the children. He produced 2 large boxes wrapped in gold paper, handing them to Sophie and Ethan with a flourish. "And for my amazing kids," he declared. The children tore into their gifts, revealing a high-tech gaming console for Ethan and a diamond bracelet for Sophie. Their squeals of delight filled the room, and the family erupted into applause. "You really outdid yourself this year, Livingstone," one of the relatives remarked, raising a glass in his direction. Livingstone grinned, basking in the praise. "Well, Christmas is all about giving, isn't it?" Rebecca watched the scene unfold, her grip tightening on the edge of the sofa. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her expression remained calm. She had waited for this moment, and now it was time. She rose from her seat, holding a small, elegantly wrapped box. "Livingstone," she said, her voice cutting through the chatter, "I have a gift for you as well." Livingstone turned to her, his smile faltering slightly. "For me?" Rebecca nodded, stepping forward and handing him the box. "I think you'll find it meaningful." The room grew quiet as Livingstone accepted the gift. He hesitated for a moment, his gaze flicking to Rebecca's face, but her expression gave nothing away. Slowly he unwrapped the box, his movements deliberate. When he lifted the lid, the room seemed to hold its breath. Inside lay an empty bracelet case, along with the photocopied invitation. To Livingstone's face drained of color. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low. Rebecca crossed her arms, her tone calm but unyielding. "That," she said, "is the bracelet you gave Amanda. You remember Amanda, don't you? The woman you took to the Whitmore's holiday dinner? The one you claimed was a family heirloom meant for our daughter someday." Gasps rippled through the room, and whispers buzzed like electricity. Relatives exchanged wide-eyed glances, their shock evident. "I don't know what you're talking about," Livingstone said, his voice rising. "This is ridiculous, Rebecca." Rebecca took a step closer, her voice firm. "Don't lie to me, Livingstone. I was there. And I saw you with her. I have photos." She turned to the coffee table, where she had placed a small stack of envelopes. She picked one up and held it out. "Here. A picture's worth 1,000 words, isn't it?" Livingstone hesitated, then snatched the envelope from her hand. He pulled out the photo of him and Amanda, his arm draped casually around her, both of them laughing. His jaw clenched as he stared at the image. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, his tone defensive. "Oh," Rebecca countered, her voice icy. "Then why don't you explain it to everyone here? Because to me, it looks like you've been lying, cheating, and making a fool of this family." The room fell silent again, the weight of Rebecca's words hanging heavy in the air. Livingstone's mask of confidence cracked, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "Rebecca," he said, his voice softening, "can we talk about this in private?" "No," Rebecca said sharply. "We've been doing things your way, private, quiet, and hidden for too long. Tonight, the truth comes out. Everyone deserves to know who you really are." Tears glistened in Rebecca's eyes, but her voice didn't waver. "You've spent years pretending to be the perfect husband, the successful provider, the man everyone admires. But behind closed doors, you've been selfish, deceitful, and cruel. This isn't just about Amanda. It's about the way you've treated me, the way you've put your ego above our family." Livingstone opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He looked around, seeing only the judgment in the eyes of his family. Rebecca turned to the children, her voice softening. "Sophie, Ethan, I'm sorry you had to hear this, but I want you to know something. This isn't your fault, and none of this changes how much I love you." Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears, and Ethan clung to his sister's hand. Rebecca straightened, turning back to Livingstone. "You've made your choices, Livingstone. Now it's time to face the consequences." The room remained silent as Rebecca walked away, her head held high. The truth was out, and there was no going back. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of liberation. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: she would no longer live in the shadows of Livingstone's lies. The penthouse was eerily quiet after the confrontation. The guests had left hours ago, their murmurs of discomfort and hurried goodbyes still echoing faintly in Rebecca's mind. The Christmas tree lights twinkled in the dimly lit room, casting shadows that seemed to dance with the weight of the evening's revelations. Rebecca sat at the edge of the sofa, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of chamomile tea. The warmth seeped into her fingers, but it did little to thaw the icy numbness in her chest. Her thoughts raced, colliding in a storm of anger, hurt, and exhaustion. She stared out at the city skyline, a blanket of snow softening the harsh edges of the buildings, yet her own edges felt sharper than ever. Footsteps approached hesitantly. Livingstone appeared in the doorway, his once impeccable suit wrinkled, his tie undone. He looked smaller somehow, his usual air of self-assuredness replaced by something unfamiliar: vulnerability. "Rebecca," he began, his voice low and tentative. She didn't turn to face him, her gaze fixed on the glittering city. "What do you want, Livingstone?" Her voice was steady but devoid of warmth. "I need to talk to you," he said, stepping further into the room. She finally looked at him, her eyes meeting his. "Talk, then." He hesitated, his hands fidgeting, a nervous habit she hadn't seen in years. He faltered, running a hand through his hair. "I know I've hurt you. I've made mistakes, terrible ones. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you." Rebecca's laugh was bitter, cutting through the silence like glass. "Love?" she repeated, her voice incredulous. "Do you even know what that word means, Livingstone? Because what you've done, lying, cheating, humiliating me in front of our family, that isn't love." He sank into the armchair across from her, his shoulders slumping. "You're right," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been selfish. I let my ambition, my ego, consume me. But Rebecca, I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family." Rebecca's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on the cup in her hands. "You should have thought about that before you decided to betray us." Tears glistened in Livingstone's eyes, and he leaned forward, his voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you for a chance to make this right. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just please don't give up on us." For the first time that night, Rebecca saw the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had once been vulnerable, honest, and full of dreams. But she also saw the man he had become, and she couldn't ignore the damage he had caused. She set her cup down on the coffee table, leaning back against the sofa. "You want forgiveness," she said, her voice firm. "Then you need to earn it, and that starts with full transparency." Livingstone nodded eagerly. "Anything. I'll give you access to my phone, my emails, my schedule. Whatever you need to feel secure." Rebecca held up a hand, stopping him. "It's not just about access, Livingstone. It's about change, real, tangible change. We'll go to therapy, both individual and couples counseling. You'll address your narcissism, your need for validation at the expense of those who love you. And you'll prove through actions, not words, that you're committed to rebuilding this family." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing as he processed her words. "I'll do it," he said, his voice resolute. "I'll do whatever it takes, Rebecca. Just don't walk away from me. From us." Rebecca studied him for a long moment, searching his face for sincerity. "You need to understand something," she said quietly. "This isn't going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight. Trust isn't rebuilt with grand gestures or promises. It's rebuilt brick by brick, day by day. And if you falter, even once we're done. Do you understand me?" Livingstone nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and desperation. "I understand." The penthouse was quiet, save for the soft hum of jazz playing from the speakers. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the floor-to-ceiling windows, their delicate patterns illuminated by the city's twinkling lights. The faint sound of fireworks echoed in the distance, heralding the arrival of a new year. Rebecca sat cross-legged on the plush rug in the living room, watching Sophie and Ethan as they played a board game near the fireplace. So the warmth of the fire bathed the room in a golden glow, and the children's laughter, though quiet, felt like a balm to her weary heart. Livingstone sat in an armchair nearby, a book in his lap. He wasn't reading, though. His gaze rested on the children, a small, genuine smile tugging at his lips. Rebecca noticed the way he leaned forward slightly, engaging in their game, with subtle comments of encouragement. It wasn't much, but it was more than she had seen in years. "Dad," Ethan said, grinning, "you're going to lose at this game next time. I'm getting really good." Livingstone chuckled. "We'll see about that. You might have to give me some pointers." Rebecca observed the exchange silently, her thoughts a mixture of cautious hope and lingering doubt. She didn't fully trust these moments, yet they were too new, too tentative, but she appreciated the effort. Livingstone's usual arrogance had softened, replaced by an unfamiliar humility that hinted at the possibility of change. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Rebecca excused herself and retreated to her favorite spot on the penthouse balcony. Crisp night air wrapped around her like a familiar embrace, and she pulled her woolen cardigan tighter. The city stretched out before her, vast and alive, its lights reflecting 1,000 possibilities. She opened her journal, the pen poised in her hand. The words came slowly, carefully chosen, as though she were speaking directly to her future self. This past year has tested me in ways I never imagined. It broke me, but it also forced me to see my strength. And forgiving Livingstone isn't about forgetting what he did. It's about giving myself permission to heal whether or not he earns his redemption. He's trying, I can see that. But trust is a delicate thing, and I've learned that it must be built brick by brick. If he stumbles, I'll walk away because I know my worth now, and I won't settle for anything less than respect, honesty, and love. She closed the journal, exhaling a long breath. Her gaze drifted to skyline, where fireworks exploded in bursts of color, their brilliance fading almost as quickly as it appeared. Behind her, Livingstone stepped out onto the balcony, a blanket draped over his arm. "Thought you might be cold," he said, his voice soft. Rebecca took the blanket, her fingers brushing against his. "Thank you," she said, her tone measured but sincere. They stood in silence, watching the fireworks light up the sky. "Happy New Year, Rebecca," Livingstone said, his voice tinged with quiet hope. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Happy New Year, Livingstone." So the final fireworks faded. Rebecca turned back to the city, her thoughts her own. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. She would face it on her terms, with resilience and self-respect as her guiding stars. Would you give someone a second chance after such a betrayal? Why or why not? How does this story reflect the balance between forgiveness and self-respect? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.